2025 compared to 2024, this was at 6 a.m. So keep in mind, I had not even sold anything yet. I was up 175% over last March.
Wow.
Okay, there we go.
Hey.
There we go. For some reason, my Wi-Fi upstairs is just...
That's the beauty of computers. You just never know. Well, so I kind of want to start off with a couple big picture questions. First question is, how has your intake and pricing strategy evolved over the years?
Oh my gosh. Okay. This is going to be a little bit longer of an answer because when we first started, we were just pricing like at what we would kind of purchase things at ourselves. And that was 13 years ago now. And over the last 4 years, we have really started to like hone in on our pricing. So we have a pricing guide, which is basically a Excel spreadsheet, and it divides things into different levels. And then we have a brand level list where all of the brands that we accept are placed into these different levels based on their price points. And then, the pricing guide will have like a level 3 short sleeve top. Is it a basic top? Is it a graphic tee? Is it embroidered? Things like that. And then you will have like a low, medium, middle, high price point. But our pricing also is also determined now too based off inventory levels. So if we have a lot from a certain brand, we're already being extra selective, but we may shift our pricing a little bit just to try and move out some more of that brand. And then we're also going to be determining, is that a brand that we're going to be keeping in the future? Or is that a brand that we maybe need to look at phasing out? But then also too, we are doing a lot more with luxury and with Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Gucci, all of those prices really it's a market value price. So those pieces require a lot of research and, just time and expertise to get them priced appropriately.
It kind of sounds like you initially had what you might call loose or free-for-all pricing approach, where it's each item comes in, there's sort of a standard split. It's the split percentage isn't by price, but you've moved into a more structured pricing strategy. Why did you make that change?
I just felt like there were some brands that were being underpriced, and one of the goals being a consignment store, is you're selling items for other people. You want them to be happy with your services. So if you are routinely underpricing their expensive pieces, they're not going to bring you those pieces. Now, some of that too does go into play, like with each store's market. A store 2 hours from me may be able to get more or less for an item than I can. A store in a totally different state may be able to get way more. That's always going to vary a little bit. But I just wanted to make sure from my area that I really knew what my customers valued as far as what brands they love. And I also got my consignors top dollar because we are shifting more to a luxury business. And so I need to make sure that my pricing stays consistent and also appropriate for the items coming in.
Okay, that actually leads into another question I had. You talk about using information from your local market to consider the pricing of your inventory. What's that look like? How do you gain that information? How do you use it?
So how we gain the information is really looking at our own sales data. What is the return rate, items from this brand, and then a lot of the times, I'll do a little bit more investigation. Is it pricing? And then I will research. I'll look up like, what is this listed for on ThreadUp? What are people listing this for on Poshmark? What are these items actually selling for on those platforms? What are they actually selling for on eBay? Is my pricing within line, or is my pricing completely crazy? And that's why they're not selling. So we look at the turn, and then from there, we kind of go into a deeper dive to see, are we wrong, or is this just not a brand that our market loves?
Okay, so it sounds like you do the research online, obviously extensive. And what I'm hearing is maybe the more expensive an item, the more research. And then one of the ways you consider for us locally as a store, you look at how fast the item sells. And if it's selling really, if you put it up and it's gone, that makes you think, okay, maybe I'm underpricing.
Yeah. Maybe I'm underpricing it, or is this just a brand that people in my market really, really want right now?
Okay.
So I look at everything, and if I'm pricing it well and it's just a super popular brand, then I'm going to work on getting more of that in. So I'm going to start emailing my consignors. I'm going to start doing social media posts, asking for more of that brand to be brought into the store.
Another bigger picture question, and I wanted to get this one right away. What advice would you give a store who's trying to create an intake and pricing workflow? So this is either a new store or a store who's considering, hey, maybe we need to tighten up our processes here.
Track everything. Track everything to start. And then as you work through all of this, you will naturally be able to say, okay, let's track by category, let's track by brand, maybe let's not track by size specifically. Track everything until you can figure out what you don't actually need to track. And I feel like some people would say, oh, that's really like counterproductive. But you don't really know as a business owner what you need to track until you sit here one day and go, oh, I wish I had that data. So by doing that, if you track everything, you'll quickly realize what you don't need to track, and then you can stop tracking it. And then you're also going to find things like, oh, I wish I was tracking X, Y, and Z more or more in depth. And then you have all that knowledge there and all that data to go in depth as much as you need to. And you can just kind of keep building on those reports.
And that tracking is mainly for pricing purposes. Am I right?
Pricing, but also just to figure out what your customers are buying. So what you should be intaking.
Okay.
If you're intaking 300 pieces, but 150 of them are brands your customers aren't buying, that's not a good use of your time. It's all part of the intake process. You want to make sure you're taking as many of the right items as you can, and as few of the wrong items as you can.
And when you look at these numbers, I know there's probably a few metrics you look at. What are maybe the top two? You're really going to, if you can track anything, track these two metrics. What are the two that you?
So the two that oh my gosh, only two. That's hard.
You can do three.
Okay, three. Let's do three. So I would track the brand. I would track the turnover rate, and then I would also track your average length on shelf. So like for me, if I look at my report right now for this month, Louis Vuitton, we have sold 30 Louis Vuitton pieces. It's a luxury brand, right? So, 30, it's like, oh my gosh, well, it's only day 25. 30 pieces of Louis Vuitton, I think is right around $14,000 or $15,000. So I'm looking and I'm like, okay, for this month, I think our average days on the shelf is 16 days.
That's huge.
Yes. So, I can't promise if a Louis Vuitton comes in the store that it's going to sell in 16 days or less. But that's just a really good indicator to me, like, hey, this brand is selling very quickly, very well. You're selling more than one piece a day. Let's get it out of here.
Do you share any of that turnover data with your consignors? Like, hey, Louis Vuitton 16 days. Oh, wow.
And you would kind of be silly not to share that, because your consignors are bringing you things to sell for them. So you want them to bring you things that are going to sell. They can't know what that is unless you tell them. And so you might have consignors who are like, oh, I have this Louis Vuitton bag. I haven't used it in forever, but I don't know if I want to get rid of it. And then you're like, hey, Louis Vuitton is my number one seller. We're selling on average more than one a day. I think I'm actually more than one a day for the year so far. Wow. And on average, they're gone in 16 days or less. That person who may be on the fence may decide to bring you their bag.
That's awesome.
Yes. So I am constantly telling them all of this. And I even go so far as to break it down, like, these are our best-selling luxury brands, these are our best-selling designers, these are our best-selling name brand. Because not everybody's going to have Louis Vuitton, but they might have Lululemon in their closet. Well, I want Lululemon too. But if I only focus on the luxury, then I might lose somebody who's like, oh, she only sells Louis Vuitton.
Do you deliver those insights to your consignors on a monthly basis, yearly? How do you keep them updated as to what's selling well?
So I usually try to send my consignors an email once a month. And I try to keep it to really what is selling right now, what our customers are buying, also what our customers are asking for. We have a request list. It's also from talking to people in the store and hearing in conversation. So I always try to email my consignors once a month and say, hey, this is what is selling right now.
Okay. Another question, do you have separate employees for pricing and intake, or do the same employees receive the items and price them?
So right now, I do not. It is mainly me. I am the only one who does the pricing. My employees will all intake, but I am the only one that does the pricing. That is going to be changing just because we have more than doubled our monthly sales over last year. Yeah, month to date. And, part of this is because of all the tracking and just the analyzing we've been doing. I work with some retail consultants. I meet with them twice a month. They're great guys. So we're just getting busier. So I am actually going to be switching one of my employees to a little bit more of the operation side of things. So she's been assisting me with product photography for the luxury pieces. I have my friend who does all my photo editing. So, I'll send them to her. So while I'm doing other stuff, she's editing all the photos, making sure the colors are correct. And then my other employees are going to really be focused on sales. They'll probably still do some intake right now. But usually Bethany or I will be here. So one of us will do the operations side. That way my other employees can just focus on selling.
Okay. When it comes to having an online store and a brick and mortar store, how does that affect your intake and pricing process?
So it doesn't really affect our intake. With pricing, especially with the luxury items, we really have to make sure our pricing is on par with, I'm going to call them the big dogs, industry leaders, Fashion File, Rebag, Real, Linda Stuff, Yugi's Closet, and Fabulous Finds. So I need to make sure that our pricing is in line with them, especially when it comes to like the condition and stuff like that. There's just a little bit more pressure to make sure I'm pricing the items appropriately and competitively when we're looking at the luxury pieces specifically.
Okay. Say you get 5 luxury items. Obviously, luxury, little longer pricing workflow than a higher tier brand. How long would it take you to process those 5 bags, to do the intake, to price, and have them labeled and ready to sell?
Oh my gosh. So when we do luxury bags, let's say we have those 5, like you mentioned. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to look them over and do an in-house authentication. Then I'm going to photograph them for a professional company authentication. We use third-party services. From there, they're going to go into photography. And I like to photograph them before I sell them because when I am photographing, I'm looking for any flaws to photograph. So it's like going over things with a fine-tooth comb. Then the photos are sent to our photo editor. Typically, we have authentication results back in 24 hours. So once we have the photos back, we'll get them priced a while, unless I had any like concerns. And then typically we'll have authentication back the next day. If I have it back before we open, like before 8 a.m., they'll go out that day. If it comes back after 8 a.m., they'll go out the following business day. So we'll spend that other day like processing, like getting them prepped and ready to go. We do a lot of marketing around our luxury bags. So we do bag drops. So that's why they wouldn't go out in the middle of a business day.
Right. Same question, but for something like Lululemon. You get 5 Lululemon pieces. How long would that take?
So we still do the authentication process in-house. We go through and we look them over for any flaws. We look up what current market is on the style if we can find it, and then we will price them using our pricing guide.
Okay. And so that would maybe take
half an hour.
Terrific. So you mentioned your pricing guide. That sounds like one of the most important pieces of your intake and pricing process. Everything gets screened through it. How did you create it? And do you update it?
So I actually created my pricing guide using Sarah Marshall's consignment coaching. We do update it because our brand list does change a little bit and just the market kind of changes on some of the pieces. But the biggest component of it that gets updated the most would be the brand level list. We go through twice a year and we will actually cut hundreds of brands from our accepted list. They're under a certain threshold in sales for a year, they're gone. because I want to be taking those items that have a high turn.
So at least twice a year, you go through, you look at the sell-through rate and you say, no longer accepting, you cut. I'm assuming the new brands are layered in. That seems a little more challenging because you don't have stored data on brands you don't sell yet. How do you layer those in?
So we listen to customers in store. You know, we hear a lot of people talking about it. All of us are on social media. So usually if there's a new brand that's popping up that's getting super popular, people are talking about it. I'm going to use the Labubu's. I don't know if you've heard of them. The most popular version of them right now are these little keychains that people are putting on their bags as bag charms. Mine is on its way. I've finally caved. Things like that are really trending right now. And then we start accepting them. And then I just keep an eye on it. And then when we do our audit, I'll look at how they're performing, what their sales are. Ideally, I want a brand that I'm taking to do well over $500 in sales a year. And that's kind of honestly getting to the point where I'm going to be upping that to $1,000 or more. It needs to be selling $1,000 or more a year. If you really break that down, that's like less than $100 a month. And the reason I'm doing that is just because we have such a demand for luxury goods and I need to create more space. If I can take another Louis Vuitton or two, you know, and the Louis Vuitton is selling for $600 to $1,800, I want to take that versus, 20 loft tops that I'm going to price at $16.99.
Okay. When you do online research, some of our stores can feel overwhelmed. How many, online marketplaces are there? How extensive do I need to be? Because you could look at 20 different websites to try and figure out the price for something. So for stores who aren't doing luxury items yet, but they're doing higher end fashion brands, how would you direct them? Would you say only use these 3 websites? What would your advice to them be?
My advice would be to start with a third to a half of retail. So if it's new with tags, maybe do half. If it's not new with tags, do a third. You might not be able to find the exact shirt on the Loft website, but you can probably find something pretty similar to get an idea of current retail. And there are so many sites where people can be selling stuff. You have Facebook Marketplace, you have Poshmark, you have ThreadUp, you have eBay. You have Craigslist if people still use that. I would figure out where your customers are spending their time. And then that's what I would use to look at. Because if your customers are spending a lot of time on eBay, then eBay solds would be a really good indicator of what they may be willing to pay for something in your business.
Okay. It sounds like from a number of these questions, you have a pretty open dialogue, not only with your customers, but also your employees. You mentioned, we're all on social media. Is that something that comes naturally to you? Is this something you've had to work at to create? How's there so much dialogue going on between your consignors, you, and your employees and customers?
So I believe in transparency. There are some consignment stores that operate at this level of secrecy that I just don't quite understand. You are asking somebody, especially when you're doing luxury goods, you are asking somebody to trust you with things that they have spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on. And you're asking them to leave it with you for 30, 60, 90, 120, 180 days or longer. And trust that you're going to not let anything get damaged, within your ability. So you're asking them to hire you to do a service. If you were going to hire a cleaning company to come to your house and they wouldn't tell you what products they use to clean, are you going to let them in your house? Probably not. So I really believe in transparency. That's why my consignment agreement is literally on my website. Somebody can go on there and look at it anytime they want. They can call us. They can ask a bunch of questions. They can message us on social media. And I just feel like transparency is key. I want people to be comfortable leaving their stuff here. I want them to know that I am capable of doing the job because essentially they're hiring us for a service. We are retail, but we are also a service-based business.
Right.
So we need to be transparent. We're not doing rocket science. We're not doing some top level secret surgery or anything like that. And also I think it's really fun to explain to people sometimes, especially with luxury. That's such a fun market for me. So it is somewhat, I don't share all my secrets, don't get me wrong, but the basics are usually enough to have a really good and interesting conversation and build a relationship with somebody.
Right on. A couple other questions. This process of going from a more free intake and pricing and a more loose philosophy to a more structured philosophy. If I was a consignment store, I feel like I'd be a little scared of making that step because I don't want to lose out on sales. Did you experience that fear when you moved from more open intake to a more structured intake process? How did you overcome that?
A little bit. I always get nervous when we cut brands, because I don't want to upset somebody. And people aren't always the greatest at reading emails or reading them to actually understand what the email is saying. So we have consignors that come up that don't realize we've updated our list. They miss the email, So that is always tough. I want people to leave here having a really great experience, but also when I know that I've done everything I can to give them the information they need. I can't make everybody read and understand or want to go on and look it up before they come in. So that is always a little bit of a fear. But the thing that I remind myself is when I am cutting brands, I'm making room for more of the brand stuff from the brands that sell really well. And because I do communicate at least once a month, usually, that's always the goal, with my consignors on what's selling, it's not really a surprise. And as far as changing pricing, I would just start doing it. There doesn't need to be an announcement. There doesn't need to be, an email. I would just handle those conversations on a case-by-case basis, and if it's talking to a consignor in the event that, you're pricing a brand less than what you were, that's just a simple, based on our sales data, this price point is where this brand sells the best for us, and the whole goal is for us to sell the items you're bringing us. I don't want to call you and have you come pick up 9 out of 10 of your items. And most of the time, your consignors are going to look at you and go, "Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense." And
I feel like that relates back to your transparency motto.
Right. Yeah. Now don't get me wrong. Like if somebody's thinking of consigning a luxury item and they send me photos, am I going to stop what I'm doing to price it before they bring it in and it's under contract with me? No. We won't do that because there's just way too many factors. But I also explain to people when they do ask me to do that I have to make sure my time is reserved for the items that are here under contract. Like I've been hired to sell these items. That is where my attention needs to be. If I have the ability to do some quick research, or if it's a piece we've had in the store before and I can give them a rough idea, I will try. But our general rule of thumb is if it's not under a consignment contract with us, we are not going to price it. Because a lot of the times people on the other side, they don't understand all of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis as it is.
Okay, we're coming up on kind of the last questions here. So when your consignors bring in items, it sounds like you do the intake and pricing while they're in the store.
So we don't typically price while they're in the store. So I actually get to my store about 2.5 to 3 hours before we open every morning that I work. And that is when I will price all of the name brand and designer pieces. Luxury, because I'm getting them ready to go out the next day typically, I will actually do that stuff from home. That way when I get into the store the next morning, I can hit the ground running on things I can't do at home. Definitely probably working a little bit too much at home at the moment, but we're also like, the last I checked for our March over LY, we were up 175% compared to same time frame March of last year. So, this is one of those little growing pains. And at some point, I'm not going to have to do that at home. But right now, just to keep things rolling and the momentum going, I'm doing it. I don't love it. It's not every night, but it is what it is. So we don't typically price while they wait, but we do go through their drop-offs in store. If they want to run across the street, we're in a downtown, so we have a farmer's market right across the street from us. If they want to run over there, as long as we have their contact info and we know them, that's fine. We need to make sure they're going to come back. If it's a new consignor, we will ask them to wait in the store because we do not have room to store items that we're not taking. We can have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 drop-offs in a day. Like it'll vary. We could, we just don't have the ability. And then like on a Saturday, I'm not gonna have the girls like at the register pricing items and trying to ring people out, and it just gets to be too much. So on the days that I work, I'm usually here 2 to 3 hours before we open, and I get to turn on the music and I get to have whatever I like playing. Maybe I'm listening to a podcast or something and I'm just pricing away. I'm also, if we're doing a bag drop, I'm getting our bag alert email sent out. I'm getting ready to do our request list text messages. I'm filming content for those pieces to post on social media right at 10 o'clock. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I'm doing.
Right.
I think it's important to have people waiting in the store while you go through their drop-offs. That way you can give them feedback. But it also gives them time to look around your store, maybe do a little bit of shopping. But it also will help them tailor their future drops, especially if they're a new consignor, because they're going to be walking around your store looking at what you have. And they might go, oh, I have something like that in my closet. Oh, I have this brand. I didn't realize this was on their list. And so it just kind of helps that customer or that consignor know what types of things you're looking for.
Right. Okay, I have two questions and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
The first is you've mentioned these consultants before. I'm curious, how have they helped you tighten up your business? Would you recommend this to other store owners? What's your experience with them so far?
So the company, the guys that I work with they're the retail guys, and they are phenomenal. If you have the money to spend on them, not everybody will at this point in their business. 2025 compared to 2024, this was at 6 a.m. So keep in mind, I had not even sold anything yet. I was up 175% over last March.
Wow.
They're great. They're helping me keep track of the numbers. They're helping me look at the data, and they know what metrics that, we need to be looking at, because we are consignment and it is a little bit different than retail. But at the end of the day, we're still retail stores. And, you have to be looking at the products you're taking and making sure that you are taking the right products that your customers want to buy.
Right. Okay, last question. And you might touch back on something you've already said, but any advice or something we haven't said or talked about in this, what piece of advice would you give consignment stores on their intake and pricing process?
I think I'm going to double down on, if you are not tracking the brands that sell for you, and if you're not at least tracking category data and making your intake decisions based off of that information, you are holding yourself back. Really getting into it and looking at brands. I think a lot of store owners would be surprised that a brand that they thought was one of their best sellers is actually closer to like number 9 or 10 on their best selling list. I think as store owners, especially when we're working in the business all the time, you see the Chico's label. I'm just going to use Chico's as an example. You see that so often because you're putting it away. Somebody was trying it on. You're, checking your racks, making sure they're organized, that kind of gets stuck in your head as a bestseller. But then when you actually look at the data, you may realize, oh, that's not doing as well as I thought it was. Even myself, even with somebody who does track all the data, I am surprised sometimes at some of these brands and what their yearly sales are. And I go, oh my gosh, I would have thought that was way more. I would have thought it was better. So I'm always surprised when I do my brand audits and I cut some of these brands. I've cut a lot of the Anthropologie brands. I never would have thought that some of these Anthro brands weren't doing as well as I thought they were. But the data's right there. You can't argue with it.
And you get most of these, I'm assuming, from the ConsignCloud Insights report.
Yeah, from the Data Explorer, the inventory insights.
It sounds like you use the Data Explorer pretty frequently now.
Yes.
Right on.
Yep.
Well, hey, that's all I had. Thank you so much for.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
This is always fun and really beneficial, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, take care, Alexandria.
Bye.